very pleased to be able to speak to you about this new book. I'm Francis Moloney, generally known as Frank Moloney among most of my friends. But I'm delighted to be able to speak to you about this book, Gospel Interpretation in Christian Life, recently published by ATF in Adelaide. And I joined the Salesians in the late 50s and was ordained a priest in 1970. Since that time, full-time, I have been involved with study and research in biblical scholarship and matters theological in a number of places. I did my original studies in Rome. I completed my doctorate in Oxford in the early 70s. And since then I've taught in a lot of places all over the world. The Pontifical Biblical Institute, the Gregorian, the École Biblique in Jerusalem. I was the professor of New Testament and the dean of the faculty at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. So I've had years of experience in various parts of the world, and I've been very fortunate to have such exposure. And it's out of that this book comes. In the late 1990s, I began to work towards writing a commentary on the Gospel of Mark, which eventually was published in 2002 and has come out in a reprint in 2012. That's been a very successful book, but leading up to the publication of that book, I wrote a number of exploratory essays feeling my way around major themes, literary issues that touched upon the interpretation of the Gospel of Mark and its meaning for Christian life. And most of those articles were published in fairly hard to get to journals. And so the bulk of the first half of the book, which is called Gospel Interpretation, is dedicated to making available these otherwise unavailable studies on the Gospel of Mark. But I haven't left it entirely to Mark. I have a study on Matthew and a study on John, about the sacraments in John's Gospel. And they've both appeared elsewhere in another form. But there's a study of the Gospel of Luke, of the Eucharistic passage in Luke, which is original to this volume. And I did this study because the Lucan version of the Last Supper is very different to the one we are so used to from our celebration of Mass. It's very much about discipleship and the future of the church. And so I thought it might be useful for Christian readers to have an exposure to this Lucan understanding that you find in Luke 22. The second half of the book is called Christian Life. Several essays in this are devoted to the interface between critical gospel scholarship and the teaching office of the church. Because this is always a matter of where some care is needed, this need to be critical and yet Catholic, to be aware of the magisterium of the church and how one responds to it. And it can be sometimes a restless relationship, which I think does good things for both the scholar to be working within a tradition and for the magisterium that hears new ways of approaching old questions. And then there are final essays that are more predominantly directed to a general Christian readership, insisting on the importance of the Word of God in the life of the church. So I'm delighted to have this book with you, thanks to ATF, and I hope you all find it of some use.